So, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us on what we hope will be an exciting journey. We've created these series of webinars to really help provide you with a guide to launch and grow a successful private practice. And I just want to pick up a couple of points that are on the slide here. What we're hoping we will be able to do by sharing our expertise is really to help you avoid some of the common pitfalls and mistakes, which in turn should help save you time and money and get you to the point where you can launch your private practice more quickly than you might otherwise have been able to. So that's really what we're, some of the things that we're hoping to help with. And then I'd love to talk a bit about who are designated, which I think is our next slide. So many of you know me, but for those of you who don't, my name is Jane Braithwaite, and I'm the MD of Designated Medical, which I started in 2013, so over 10 years ago. But before I say a bit about Designated, I want to take you back even further to 20 years ago to the role I had before I launched the company, because it's relevant to the conversation we're having tonight. So all those years ago, I was involved in helping to set up a private healthcare business in Wimpole Street in London. And that was really from the very beginning of finding a building that was appropriate, raising the finance for that building. So writing the business plan, presenting that to the banks and securing the finance. And then through to refurbishing the building to a medical standard, registering with CQC, and then getting everything ready for launch. And my role was as practice manager. So then for several years, I ran the team, and within the team, we had a medical secretary, typist, people doing the billing. And really my role was to focus on delivering a really good patient experience and being responsible for marketing and financial management. So that's why I wanted to mention it, because I think that was a real first-hand experience of running a private healthcare business. And I'd like to share that information with you and hope that I can help you on your journey. But it's also relevant because that experience was the inspiration for starting Designated Medical, because what I realized were there were lots of doctors who were amazing at their clinical area, and what they really needed was business support to help them launch their business. And that's what Designated Medical does. Within the company, we have several teams. So we're able to help with planning and with marketing, and that's very much what we're going to be talking about this evening. But we also have teams who focus on the operational side, so our medical PA team, medical billing, and then we can also help with financial management. So we have a team of accountants and bookkeepers. So that's really who we are. So then to go on to the next slide, which is today's webinar. So all three of the webinars that we're going to be running will all follow a very similar format. So I'm going to introduce you to some key members of the team, and the team will share a presentation with you, sharing their expertise and experience. And at the end of that presentation, we'll do a Q&A session. And that's where, again, we're relying on the lovely Zoom technology. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you should see two buttons that are relevant. One is Q&A and one is chat. So as you have any questions, if you just hit the Q&A button, you can type your question in there. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll go through the questions and we'll do our best to answer them as fully as we can. And then next to that is the chat button. So if you want to introduce yourself to everybody, or you just want to chat about something, then that's where to do it. And I should also mention that we are recording this. There was a few consultants who couldn't make it this evening, so we promised to record it and just send them a link. So just so you know, that is happening. So next slide is our speakers, I think, Simon.
Yes.
There we go. Lovely pictures of Simon and I. So I'd love to introduce you to Simon Marrett. Simon is a specialist in starting up businesses in the private healthcare and well-being sector. And he has a wealth of experience, and he's going to share as much of that as he can with us over the next 20 to 30 minutes. So without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Simon.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. Thanks for that lovely introduction. Just a load to meet you all. Thanks for joining this evening. I know you're all very busy people. A quick 30 seconds on myself. Background as a marketeer, over 25 years operations and marketing experience. I moved into healthcare about 7-8 years ago and ran a small private health group in Wimpole Street. And through that kind of process, I met a lot of doctors and realized there was an opportunity to help doctors set up their own private practices. And that's what I've been doing. I launched my own business in just before COVID in 2020. And over that course, the last sort of 4 years or so, I've helped dozens of practitioners set up and launch their own private practices. So helping with everything really from planning and budgeting and kind of strategy and thinking about what they're going to be doing going forward, through to the kind of operations implementation stage, helping with things like CQC registration, websites, and marketing, acquiring patients, creating great content, building doctors and clinic profiles. So just a quick bit about myself and my background. Obviously, I'm delighted to be joining Jane tonight and to be talking to you about this webinar. It's a really important topic, which is very much a hot topic at the moment, I think, with everybody, based on the conferences that we're seeing taking place. So today we're going to talk 6 key areas that we're going to focus on. Firstly is about kind of vision and that kind of starting point of, what is it you're trying to do? What is your long-term ambition for your clinic, and what's been holding you back? Why now? We'll talk a lot about kind of value proposition, a term that you'll hear a lot tonight and perhaps one you've not heard of before. We want you to really understand what your clinic is going to be, the services you'll be offering, who your patients are going to be in the future, and how you're going to help them. And there's ways that we can help you do that. Your unique selling points are really important. Private practice is becoming, it's a growth area, but there are more and more private practices opening up. And it's important that you're not just a Me Too clinic. You're not just launching into a market where you're the same as everybody else. So how do you differentiate yourself in that market? We'll talk you through some of the success factors, some of the things you need to be thinking about right now, actually, in that kind of planning phase, which are going to build towards a successful clinic kind of going forward. How to plan for your business, thinking about budgeting, thinking about building a robust business plan is important. And Jane touched on a point earlier we caught up today about, we find that many of our clients and clinicians will be very much focused on patients and patient outcomes. But when you venture into private practice, you are launching a private business and you need to treat it like a business. So you need to ensure it's profitable. And we can help you with that with some of the tips and frameworks that we're going to go through today. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about day-to-day operations. You don't need to get too far into this at this point, but you should have an idea of how your clinic is going to run in the future, what your team may look like, clear roles and responsibilities. We'll cover this in a lot more depth in webinar 3 in May, but today we'll just touch on that area. So that's the kind of agenda. It should take about 25 minutes. We've got plenty of time for a Q&A afterwards. So I'll move through the slides fairly swiftly. So when it comes to vision, the first thing we typically ask, clinicians and practitioners is, where do you want to be in 3 to 5 years? What's the vision here? Where are you going? Why are you doing this at this time? What are the drivers? And the answers we often get back are very, very different. So for some, it's about an opportunity in the market, ambition. They really want to grow and accelerate their kind of clinic. They see an opportunity in the market. For others, it's about a long-term solution. It's about a plan for entering into retirement in the future. But the drivers are often very different. Are you thinking about a single or multiple clinic? Or are you even more ambitious? Now you're thinking about kind of international kind of opportunities and training academies and various other ways in which you can raise your profile. Work-life balance is incredibly important. How is this private practice going to fit with all your other work that you're doing? When we talk to many of our clients, they are writing books, they're training, they're kind of teaching, so how many days a week are you going to commit to this? What's your role going to be within the clinic? What does that work-life balance look like amongst your kind of personal and your kind of work life? Again, we've touched a little bit on the clinic team, both the clinical and the support team. So give some thought to that in terms of what that may look like. And a really important point here is, who are the patients that you want to treat? If you're making a conscious decision to move into the private sector, you need to think about the patients that you want to treat, what are their personas, what are their profiles, but also who are the patients you don't want to see. You may have come from the NHS, where obviously you're seeing a lot of patients. In private practice, you can be far more discerning about the types of treatments you want to offer, the types of conditions you want to treat, and the types of patients that you want to attract. You also need to think about CQC registration. And are you going to go down that route, or are you thinking about practicing privileges only? Now, a good example of this is I met somebody this week who was about to think about opening a practice on a physical practice, and hadn't really thought about the CQC registration process. And it's really important because there's a 6-month waiting list at the moment. So if you're thinking now, end of March, I'd like to launch by September, October, and you've not submitted your application, you won't be able to launch in the autumn. You're going to be looking at probably later this year, if not early part of 2025. So if you are thinking about CQ registration, it's really important to get the ball rolling quickly. And in order to do that, you'll need to get certain things in place. And again, a point Jane often touches on is around what is your end goal and what is your exit strategy. So if you're planning, like I said, to work over the course of the next 15 years and slow down into retirement, or you're looking at a kind of a rapid growth period over the next 3 to 5 years, and you want to sell your business within that period, then the implications for your business plan are going to be very, very different in terms of resourcing, in terms of finance, in terms of the growth trajectory that you're going to be going through as a clinic. And a good question I always like to ask is, what does great look like for you in 3 to 5 years? And when a practitioner kind of sits down and thinks about it, often they'll come up with lots of things which actually are not related to work. Often it's about kind of work-life balance and family and how their practice is going to fit into their kind of work. So there's just some thoughts there, hopefully, around vision that will resonate with some of you there. Now, we can help you with that or with various frameworks, but one we like to use is one called the ACTOMS framework that you may have heard of before. Ambition, challenges, target audience, one key message, media, and success. And the idea is that on one slide or one sheet of paper, you can start to jot down your thoughts and give it a bit of a kind of framework. So what are you trying to do? Take that vision. What are you trying to achieve and in what time frame? So, try to break that out a little bit into a little bit more detail. Where would you like to be? What's the size of the clinic? How many clinics? What's the size of the team? What revenue are you looking to generate? What kind of income would you like to bring in? All of these things are worth kind of actually jotting down as part of that ambition. And what's preventing you from getting there up until now? What are those challenges and obstacles that are getting in your way? Is it around finance? Is it around resourcing? Is it around perhaps skill set that you don't have? So perhaps you don't know how to get there, and maybe you need to bring in an external team for a period of time to help you achieve that ambition. We touched on this on the previous slide, but target audience is really important. So being very clear about who you want to treat, the different conditions and treatments, different personas, being very clear. Often you'll be talking to perhaps 3 or 4 different target audiences that you're looking to attract. So breaking those out, understanding their different needs is a really good exercise to kind of go through, and it doesn't take a lot of time. Once you've done the first 3, one really difficult thing to do is to try and kind of encapsulate and distill down what your clinic is, who the patients that you're going to treat, the services that you're offering, and how they're going to benefit patients, and doing that in one key message. Now, once you've done that, you may have heard something called like an elevator pitch is used in other industries, but it's just the idea that once you've decided who you are and what you do, then you communicate that consistently through every marketing channel. So that's your website, it's briefing your patient care team, it's your social media profile, it's your LinkedIn profile, it's in your emails that are going out to patients. It's that consistency and repetition that's really important. And once you understand what you're trying to say, you then need to think about the media and the channels in which you want to communicate that message. So is it through webinars like we're doing this evening? Is it through your website? Is it through advertising? You may be considering Google ads or advertising on paid social media, for instance. Whatever you're doing, you want to be consistent in what you're doing in those channels. And finally, you're going to need to pin down, what does success look like for you? So we talk about ambition, and ambition can be quite ethereal in terms of, what does it feel like in 3 to 5 years? But also, what does it look like on paper? What size clinic are you going to be? What revenue streams are you bringing in? What's the size of your kind of team? What does success look like for you? Try and map that down on kind of paper. And again, this ACTOMS framework is a very handy framework to use to kind of just get the ball rolling, get your thoughts down on paper, start to document things and take a step in the right direction. So crucial success factors. What are those key factors you need to think about now when set up your private practice, which are going to ensure kind of success in the future? Well, firstly, we'll go into value proposition. I've already mentioned this before, but we'll go into a lot more depth around that now. What are those unique selling points around your clinic? We can't have you just being a Me Too clinic. Do you know your competition? What's the market look like around you? Who else is competing and how are they competing? What are their points of differentiation? What about pricing? How are you going to price? What about your fees? What about the treatments? What's the strategy you're going to use to price your service and your private practice? And then brand and communication. How do you want to look and feel in front of your patients? Do you want that wow factor when somebody lands on your website? What do you want to have to come across as local, warm and friendly, the beating heart of the community. They're two very different kind of like personas, two very different tones of voice and characteristics that, you could go in either direction, but you need to start thinking about the look and feel of your practice, that brand and communication aspect, because it will resonate through everything that you do. So you've heard me mention this 2 or 3 times already tonight, and I know there's some people on the call tonight who talk about this. But a value proposition is probably the starting point. And often when you're thinking about setting up, you do need to go through this process. And it's a short, succinct statement that really sums up what is your clinic, who are the patients that you'll be treating, what are the services and treatments that you're offering, and what are those tangible benefits that you'll be delivering to them, and are they unique? Again, we've talked about the idea of what is it that's going to make your clinic different to everything else that's out there. And this is really important for 2 clear reasons. One is it provides a clear message and understanding to your patients about who you are, what you do, and how you're going to meet their needs. It also can work internally, so it's really useful for briefing the internal team so they understand what your clinic is. So when they're speaking to patients, they understand what the proposition is and they're able to communicate it clearly. It also highlights those key features that are going to differentiate you from those other clinics and practitioners that are available. Patients have more and more choice these days, so why are they going to choose you? Now, to help you with that, we have a really good canvas, another framework. You've had ACTOMS, and now this is the value proposition canvas. So this is designed really just to help you kind of like put a structure around this. And it's a one-sheeter. You can print it off an A4, A3. We'll send you a copy afterwards so you can use it after the session. And typically what it does is, as a starter for 10, you really kind of use the box at the top left to try and quickly define, I think this is 20, 25 words, what my clinic is about. In the top right-hand corner, you've got your target audience. So who are those different kind of like groups that you're looking to target? So men, women, perhaps even you might even want to go down the kind of corporate route where you're starting to target businesses. Now, then we start on the right-hand side. And the idea with the right-hand side of this canvas is that you're trying to build a picture of your ideal patient. So they are, you need to think about where they live. How old are they married? How many children do they have? What car do they drive? Where do they go on holiday? What do they do in their spare time? So you're trying to build what we call a Chinese portrait or a persona around, your typical patient. Now, why are they looking at private practice? Well, in this case, we put an example down, which is, I want to get back to living my normal life. Maybe they've been on an NHS waiting list for 6, 12 months, and they're finding that they can't live the life that they want. So they are looking for gains and they have pains. So those gains, what's going to help them? Well, they want the best treatment available. So that's what they decided. And they want to feel better ASAP. And on the flip side, they don't want to wait months. They've been waiting already 6 months. They want to get this done ASAP, but they don't understand how much it's going to cost in the private sector. They've never gone into the private healthcare sector before. So it's all new to them. And there's probably a sense of fear in the unknown that they need to kind of conquer. Once you've completed that side of the canvas, you then move to the left. And this is where you define your products and services. So we have, potentially initial consultations, you have follow-ups, you have treatments, you have medication, procedures, etc. These are ways in which your patients can engage and they will pay for these services. But what are these products and services? How are they creating gains and how are they relieving pain for the patient on the right-hand side? So in this case, we're talking about personalized treatment for you. You're able to personalize the treatment, and you're also offering the best practitioners available in the area. Now, they're huge gain creators for that patient on the right-hand side. At the same time, those pains we've talked about on the right-hand side, you're offering them reassurance and peace of mind. You're offering them affordability because maybe it's a procedure they're going through which is quite expensive. Well, but offering packages which splits that payment up over the course of 12 months, for instance, that may make it more affordable and move them to a point that they're willing to make a decision and commit. So again, this is just an example that we use, and it's worth spending an hour with your team or on an evening or a weekend when you have some free time, just jotting these down. Like I said, you can print it off, you can do it online, but it's a really good framework to kind of kick things off in terms of private practice. Now, as I mentioned at the start of the webinar, I'm a marketeer at heart, so we're taught at a very young age to put the customer at the heart of the business, and it's all about the customer experience, and private healthcare is no different. And you need to put yourself in the shoes of the patient and think about what are those important factors for them when they're thinking about moving into private healthcare and they're selecting a clinic. Well, first and foremost, it's relevant across all businesses. First impressions count. So what happens when they visit your website for the first time? Is there that wow factor? Do they feel that warm and fuzzy feeling that they're going to be well looked after? That do they want to then carry on their journey, read a blog, register some interest, maybe make an inquiry, ask for a callback? What about your social media platforms? What happens with that first phone call? Are the patient care team well briefed? Do they understand your proposition? Can they clearly explain the services and the pricing? A poor experience that first time around, then they're just going to move on to the next clinic. So it's really important that first impressions count and you do your groundwork around that. We've already talked about value proposition and unique selling points, so I'll skip over that. But are you think about the experience and reputation of your clinicians? How are you presenting that to kind of like to patients when they come to your website or when they search for you online? Are you clearly defining your specialist treatments and procedures that are available? Perhaps a patient will choose you because they can't get a treatment anywhere else. Have they come from another trusted healthcare practitioner who's recommended you or recommended your clinic? Perhaps building your network, your kind of peer group is really important as well in that area. As I mentioned before, patients want to feel looked after. So do they get that kind of nice feeling when they come to the website, they make that first call, they feel that they're going to be looked after over the course of not only the first 2 or 3 months, but perhaps over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, depending on the medical field that you're working in. Pricing as well. Price is really important. I know many clients that I've been working with who had the attitude, which is, well, I want to bury my fees in the website. Well, that isn't going to help people with their patient journey. If they're trying to assess what the best treatment is for them, having to spend 10 minutes going through your website to find your pricing isn't particularly helpful. And then they end up calling up anyway. So there's things that you need to kind of think about there relating to putting the patient first. What are they thinking about? What's in their mindset when they're thinking about moving into the private healthcare sector? So once we've thought about that, now you need to think about what your USPs are going to be. How are you going to compete? You need to think about a combination of USPs. So firstly, things like positioning in the market. So take a look at what's available out there for patients. Are you going to become the most established? Are you the most reputable? Are you the premier kind of clinic in the area because of your location, but perhaps the doctors that you have on board, the team that you have? Are you the most trusted? What is the reputation of your clinic? So have you signed up to Doctify or Trustpilot? There are many other review sites out there, I may add, but actually displaying that kind of front and center, and being known for delivering outstanding kind of patient care is a fantastic way to differentiate yourself. What about the experience and qualifications of your clinicians? Is that something you can use as a USP that differentiates you from other clinics? The idea of patient experience and service, quick, responsive, expert, the difference between calling up and speaking to somebody that sounds like they come from a call center and someone that's actually working very closely with the clinical team who understands the services is huge. Price, are you going to compete? What is your pricing strategy? And we'll come on to this on the next couple of slides, but are you going to be more of a kind of value affordability type option, or are you a premium price option? So you need to think about, where you sit, what your pricing strategy might be. Similarly to online profiles and reviews, what about your success rates? Are you demonstrating previous kind of patients that have been on a journey through with you? Can you present the effectiveness of your medication and treatment? Do you have those stories that patients like to read? That could be a really big USP. The testimonials are incredibly powerful. And location and convenience. Are you the easiest to find? When I search for your clinic or a clinic of your nature, ENT clinic, for instance, in your local area, do I find you first on Google? How convenient is it for me to get to you? If you've got a physical location, can I find you quickly? Is there parking available outside? Are you centrally located? These are all things that you need to be thinking about what are going to be your combination of USPs that you're going to use to market your clinic and how you're going to differentiate yourself from the competition. So once you've worked out what your USPs are, and you've done the work on your value proposition, you're kind of happy with that, you do then need to start thinking about your positioning in the market. So where are you in the competitive kind of landscape? Whether that's kind of like, in London, in a big city, you may be an online clinic, or you may be in a local kind of town. Where are you going to be positioned in this market against the competition? What are their strengths and weaknesses, and how are you going to compete? Remember, patients have a choice. So it's really important that you and your team know what you stand for and what the other clinics stand for too, so that you never want to talk down about the other clinics, but you need to understand what your points of differentiation are. So in this case, we've got on the y-axis, we've got premium and affordability. And on the kind of x-axis, we've got generalist and specialist. So here we've got our clinic. We've decided that we're going to be a premium clinic and we're going to be more general. So we're going to offer a wide range of services. On the right-hand side, we've got Clinic A, which is likewise a premium clinic, but actually it's going to become more specialist. So the services they're providing are very much more kind of niche. Whereas Clinic C and Clinic B have decided to go down more of a value kind of affordability kind of angle, one being more specialist and one being more generalist. So you can see once you've mapped out your 5, 6, 10 clinics perhaps that you're competing against, you can see where your competitive map is and where you sit in it. And that can really help when it comes to, again, describing your service, your clinic, and how you're different to the competition. Pricing and fees, a big area, a big question we get a lot of questions, a big area that we get a lot of questions about. The important point here is there is no exact science. There is no algorithm that's going to work out what your perfect kind of pricing model is. There is no silver bullet, but these are the factors that you need to consider. So have you thought about the costs for your clinic and setting up and the running costs? These are both the direct costs of you delivering the services to your patients, but also your overhead. So you need to think about your staffing, you need to think about your rent, you need to think about insurance, you need to think about marketing. Marketing is going to help you get out there. It's going to help you attract new patients. So have you built that in? Now that's going to have quite a big impact and influence over how much you decide to charge for your services, because you need to make a profit. What about market demand? Are you aware of how much demand there is, either locally or nationally, for the services that you're providing? Obviously, if there's huge demand, that would influence the fact that perhaps you can charge more for the service. And likewise with specialisms and scarcity of a service, if you're the only person in the county that can offer a particular service, then that would influence your pricing because you'll be able to charge more. Competitors is a really interesting one because you do need to understand what their pricing is. You need to understand what they charge, but you shouldn't be kind of trying to emulate them and just copy what they're doing. You have your clinic, and this idea that everyone's just going to charge the same, that's not a wise pricing strategy. What about your target market and location? If you're in the middle of Harley Street, for instance, in a prestigious kind of building in Wimpole or Harley Street, then you're going to be charging something very different to perhaps if you're in the outskirts or in the suburbs, because there's a perception there around kind of quality. There's also a cost base. Obviously, it costs a lot more to have a clinic in central London than it does in the suburbs. I live in Surbiton in southwest London. It's certainly probably cheaper here than it is in Harley Street. What about your positioning in the market and the perceived quality? Again, are you going to be a prestigious kind of premier kind of clinic? Is that the look and feel and the tone of voice you're going for? Or are you going to go more of a kind of a value kind of based offering? And what about plans and packages? So is it more pay as you go and you pay for your initial consultation, you pay for your review? Are you paying for kind of treatments? Or are you actually going to package things up? Are you going to offer 3-month kind of packages, for instance, or a combination of different kind of treatments? Or are you going to offer membership? Very popular at the moment with many of the clients that we're speaking to is the idea of membership, and people pay a monthly fee, but they get the services throughout the year included. And there's lots of models, especially with the kind of health tech world, where that's been very successful. Now, a really important point in red here at the end is, as a general rule, and I hope Jane would agree with me here, we typically don't recommend discounting, and we often get asked the question, well, I'm launching my clinic. What if I do a kind of like first month discount of 50% for new patients? And the answer to that is don't do it. And we typically will not recommend discounting in private healthcare. It devalues what you're offering, the services that you're providing. Our recommendation instead is to focus on value. Where can you add value to the patient? So can you offer, for instance, once they've had their initial consultation, can you do a free 15-minute phone call a week later? Can you offer them a webinar that they can attend with other patients? Can you do free downloads or guides? There's lots of ways in which you can add value to a patient without discounting, because ultimately you're just devaluing the service that you're offering. Okay, got the last section coming up now, which is all around kind of business planning, which can be a little bit dry, but it is very, very important. So you need to build a robust business plan. You need to build a budget for your clinic. As Jay mentioned at the top of the webinar, you are entering into private practice, but you are running a business, not just a clinic, and you need to ensure that it's profitable. So my final kind of framework of the night is the business model canvas. So we've had the ACTOMS model, we've had the value proposition canvas. This is an adaptation of a business model canvas that I've used. So again, it's a one-sheeter. The idea is that it kind of has all the information you need to be thinking about in one place. So you just document it in one place. At the top is, who are your patients going to be? We've already discussed this before, and how you're going to group them by their similar needs. Is it by gender? Is it by kind of conditions, treatments? It can be a combination of those different things, but you need to think about those typical groups. Then you move to the left-hand side and you think about, well, who are the partners that are going to help me, run this practice and make it successful? Well, firstly, you need a patient management system where you're going to store your medical records. The development of patient management systems over the last sort of 5 to 7 years has been huge. They're far more user-friendly than they used to be, far cheaper, actually, far more affordable than they used to be as well. But selecting the right patient management system is a big task, because it will be the kind of central cog in which your practice operates around. And 6 months down the line, if you decide to make a move away from that, operationally, that's huge. It's very disruptive. What about clinic fit out and build? Are you moving down the route of thinking you're going to have a physical clinic? So once you've got the lease sorted, it's probably worth consulting with people who do this day in, day out, because they may be able to negotiate better deals for you, be able to cut some corners and help you avoid those kind of pitfalls. What about insurance companies, getting the insurance indemnity in place? What about CQC? We touched on this at the top of the webinar about the importance of bringing CQC advice on very early on so that you set the ball rolling in advance. I worked with a healthcare startup a couple of years ago, and I think we applied, in March, April time, and we had our interview in December, and we got our CQC registration in January, middle of January, just to give you an idea of the timescales involved. What about recruitment agencies? Who are you going to use? Are you going to employ somebody to come in and work as a medical secretary, or are you going to go down the road to bring in a contractor in? Often when you're starting up, you're trying to reduce your costs. So do you need to employ somebody right at the start? And what about website development and marketing activities? So customer acquisition, retention. What about your social media platforms? How are you going to get that message out? What about your communications plan? Then you need to think about your resources. So finance, people and skill sets, knowledge, technology. What are these things that are really going to underpin your clinic? They're going to actually drive the clinic going forward. The value proposition, of course, sits at the heart of what we do, along with your USPs. Think about the communication channels you're going to be using, along with your website, email, phone, SMS, webinars. What about your patient management system? Can that be kind of integrated into your clinic so you can use that to be sending out emails and SMS reminders to your patients? And on the right-hand side, we have our packages, products and packages. So how are people going to engage with you? How do they buy the services in which you're offering them? So again, a really useful framework. Again, we can send this to you after the webinar today, but it really just helps to distill things down into one kind of sheet of paper, essentially, or one slide, and starts to get the ball rolling. It starts to put some structure around that clinic that you're looking to build for the future. I talked about I knew this section would be a little bit dry, but building a budget is really important. And, we have ready-made templates that we can send you, which can help you along with this. But firstly, you're going to need to think about your revenue streams. How much revenue you're going to bring in on a monthly basis once you launch? How much of that's going to be from initial consultations? How much will be from follow-ups? What about blood testing procedures? And if you're the type of clinic perhaps that's maybe in men's health or women's health, maybe you'll be thinking about things like vitamin sales, vitamins and supplements, for instance, or additional appointments that you can offer. Then you start thinking about cost of sales. So how much is it going to cost me to deliver the service to my patients? So what about if you're going to bring on a team of doctors? What's the business model that you're thinking about for that? Are you thinking about a 50-50 split with those doctors? Is it more 60-40 in your favor? Or are you going to go down a fixed fee kind of method? So in some way or another, you need to factor that into your kind of business model, because you'll need to plug it into the budget. Once you've done that, you can understand your gross profit, and then comes your overheads. So then you need to think about things like staffing. So are you going to employ somebody, or are you going to go down the route for year 1 and year 2 of actually employing a part-time contractor because it's cheaper and more flexible? What about your occupational costs? So rent and maintenance of the building, professional fees, CQC you need to apply. You may need to bring an advisor in to help you on that journey. What about the IT, the technology that underpins your clinic? These are all important things that you need to map out. Banking, legal costs, office, marketing. How are you going to reach new patients? How are you going to raise awareness to bring those patients into your clinic? And then what about HR and training? So if you are going to employ people and you are looking to bring in a full-time or even a part-time practice manager, it's no small step to become an employer. As employers, and I to think about training. There's a lot of compliance around that you need to think about. There are alternatives available. So these are the things that you need to think about. Now, along with your budget, we recommend building out a dashboard. And the idea of a dashboard, and the way I like to explain it, is you need to know what's going on in your business, what's driving the performance of your clinic. So when you look at the end of the month and you see you've generated tens of thousands of pounds, where is that revenue coming from? Which revenue line is it coming from? Is it coming because you're doing a great job finding new patients? Or is it the fact that your patients love you so much they keep coming back for more, and your renewal and your retention rates are fantastic? So we use this kind of, it's called pirate metrics. Now, I learned it many years ago, but the idea is that acquisition is your marketing engine. It's am I reaching the right target segments? The target audience we mentioned at the top of the webinar, am I finding them? Is that generating website inquiries for me? Are the phones ringing? Are new patients coming in? Then we move to the activation stage. So once the phones are ringing and inquiries, are they the right type of kind of patients that you're bringing in? Are they then going to the next step where perhaps you're offering a free discovery call with a practice manager? Maybe they've completed a quiz online. Maybe there's a callback service that you're offering. There may be different ways in which you can activate. Maybe they're just registering on your website for a newsletter. But activation is a really important step because it just shows that intent to purchase. We then look at the revenue stream, which is obviously the first time that someone pays for an appointment or a procedure. That's new patients. So you want to be tracking the number of new patients you're bringing in each month and the number of initial consultations. This will show you how successful you're being with your marketing, or certainly the acquisition side of your marketing. Then we move into the retention column. This is about, now, not every clinic that I work with focuses on retention. So I work closely with an ENT clinic, for instance, where review consultations just aren't relevant because a patient has symptoms and a condition, they come in, they have a consultation, they get treatment, and they don't come back. But in menopause clinics, review consultations on a regular basis are really, really important. So you need to think about the retention. So how many review consultations? What's your recall percentage? So of those 100 patients that are due next month, what percentage of them already booked in? So you need to look at that metric. It's really important, and you need to put processes in place to ensure that those patients that are coming back and they're remaining loyal. And then what does your total revenue look like for the clinic? And the final column is almost a panacea really around the perfect situation is that you're generating lots of new patients, they're staying for a long time, and those patients that stay with you then leave lots of 5-star reviews for you. They love your service, they keep coming back, and they're advocates for you. So they're going out into the marketplace, they're recommending you to friends and family, and they're helping drive your acquisition at the other end of the funnel on the left-hand side of the screen. So that just gives you an idea of, this is a very simple dashboard. It doesn't take long to set up, but it really will lift the bonnet on what's happening in your clinic, and you can do it from day one. Okay, the final slide from me today before I pass back to Jane is all about day-to-day operations. And as I mentioned at the top of the webinar, we will cover this in a lot more depth when it comes to webinar 3. But just have an idea, start to think about what the shape of your clinic is going to look like. If you're going to take the founder and kind of clinical director role, which is very typical, what's your clinical team look like? Are you going to have 1 or 2 doctors underneath you for or working under you for year 1? Are you going to have a nurse? You're going to have another healthcare practitioner working with you, maybe an HCA. And then what does the clinic team look like from a kind of practice manager and medical secretary perspective? Who's picking up the phones? Who's liaising with the patients? Who's answering the emails? Perhaps you can extend those roles into managing your social media channels as well. So what does that team kind of look like? And then you can't forget the back office. So yes, that's the day-to-day running of the clinic, meeting, talking to patients. But what about your commercial and marketing team? Who's building partnerships? Who's driving traffic to your website? Who's managing your social media? Who's managing your website? Who's working on your SEO? Who's creating great high quality content for your website, which is going to help you boost up those kind of like the social media and the kind of SEO rankings and drive more traffic to your website? And then who's going to look after your accounts? Who's the kind of finance function within your team? Doesn't need to be full-time, could be part-time, but it's a really important aspect of the business to be thinking about in terms of billing, bookkeeping, accountancy. So this is a simple structure. Again, this is something we can help you with, and we can send some examples over, but hopefully it'll give you a good flavor of the types of things that you need to be thinking about. So that's the end of my presentation today. And just to recap, I hope what are probably some of the most important points. So firstly is around vision. We talked right at the top of the webinar about being really clear. Why are you here today? Why are you making this move? What are those drivers? What are you looking to achieve over a 3 to 5 year period? Try and think a bit more long term than just the year ahead. Value proposition, we spent a lot of time talking about value proposition and that importance of communicating it consistently. If there's one thing I'd recommend that you take away tonight and you're thinking about setting up in private practice, is take an hour out over the next week and just work on that. Just work on trying to get that distill it down into 1 or 2 slides and maybe 25 to 30 words. Unique selling points, how you're going to compete. Patients have choice. It's really important that they understand who you are, what you do, and why you're different from the competition. Hopefully in the last couple of slides, I've demonstrated some really simple steps you can take in terms of business planning. It doesn't need to take a huge, great kind of like Excel spreadsheet with lots of tabs. A simple spreadsheet with a month-by-month revenue figure, with your costs outlined, some forecasting, what you're pricing, feeding your pricing into that as well is really good. But do the groundwork now. What you don't want to be doing is going headlong into building a website, starting to go down the road of CQC, maybe signing leases, etc., without doing that kind of groundwork. And I know a lot of you are already doing the groundwork, but I do see examples of, people building websites who have spent thousands of pounds without actually having registered the company or thought about a budget and the profitability of their clinic. And then finally, again, we'll touch on this in a lot more detail in May, but think about how you want that clinic to function once it's up and running. Who is that team you're going to have in place? The practice manager, the medical secretary working with you is an incredibly important role, especially if you go down that CQC route. And think about ultimately, again, with my marketing hat on, it's about that patient journey and that patient experience and how you can deliver that, an outstanding patient experience consistently. So we had a few questions. I think I'm going to stop talking now, Jane. I'm going to hand back to you, if that's okay.
Oh, lovely. Thank you, Simon. I mean, these are some of the questions that have been asked by people who are not here this evening, but there are a couple of questions on the Q&A actually. So I just wanted to deal with those first, if we can. So the first question is, would any clinic providing services need CQC to commission it? Well, I'll answer that, and then I'll hand over to Simon to answer it. So if you look on the CQC website, there are a list of regulated activities, and if your clinic is doing any of those regulated activities, then you have to be registered with CQC. So really, to answer the question completely, we'd need to know exactly what it is you're doing and do that comparison. So that's the answer. You need to look at those regulated activities and see if your activities fall into that. We have a CQC consultant who we work with regularly. So when we're working with a client who needs CQC registration, we always involve her. So it's something we could follow up for you. So if you wanted to let me know a bit more about what it is you're doing, I can definitely ask our consultant and get you some guidance on that. So that's something we could follow up in more detail on. Is there anything you want to add, Simon?
Not a huge amount. I think, the other route obviously is sort of practicing privileges, where you may want to kind of contact kind of other clinics to work under their CQC kind of registration. Again, it comes back to that idea of kind of vision and what you're trying to achieve and the ambition there. But I think, you've covered it, I think, nicely. I think the first place to start would be the CQC website. Get in touch with us. Like I said, like Jane said, like we work with CQC advisors. I just would advise that be careful about who you select. Make sure you go with a recommended advisor. There's been some bad, I've heard about some bad cases of people being advised and not getting through the interview, having waited 6 months and then found that actually they failed with their application. So do speak to us. We'll make sure we point you in the right direction and we give you a reputable consultant.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because you don't want to wait for 6 months only to find that the way in which you've prepared isn't what CQC was looking for. So So that's the one about CQC. Then there's two more. There's another one here. Where do I go to get a website? They're so variable in price. Yeah, I mean, this is something that we talk about almost on a daily basis. And I actually think this is an area where a lot of clinicians have spent more money than they needed to, and probably not really got a website that they wanted. I mean, my view is you should always go with a provider who understands the private medical sector. So it needs to be a website developer who understands the industry sector, because a website that might work in a financial world isn't going to be the right kind of website to work in this world. So that's one thing. The other thing I think is really important is everyone focuses on day one and getting the website created, but actually maintaining the website is really, really important. You know, if your developer or provider doesn't look after your website, it will slowly start to grind to a halt and crash. So you need to choose someone who is going to work with you on a long-term basis, so someone you can trust to be there. And I found, you know, doctors tend to go one of two ways. They often go with someone who is a friend of a friend who can do it quite cheaply, and then that friend of a friend isn't necessarily there in 6 months' time. Or they go with a big agency who charge them thousands of pounds for something they don't really need. So I think you need to find someone who understands the industry and can advise you on what you really do need. So you're not going for all bells and whistles on day one if you don't need them. That would be my advice. And you know, again, it's something we do. You know, we design websites for people, so we can talk you through how we would approach it, if that would be helpful. Again, yeah, Simon, I'll hand over to you.
100% agree, Jane, with everything you said there. I think the only thing I'd add there is that often a phased approach can work. So when we typically work on kind of website projects, it's like, well, what do you need in the first 6 months? Because often what you need is actually a destination. You need potentially just a one-page website that explains who you are, what you do, your key services, your USPs, and then you can build from there. So take a phased approach and think about, okay, well, what do I need in month 1 and 2? And then start to build out the pages around kind of symptoms and treatments. Also, things change over time. So you could commit a huge amount of money, as Jane said, and in 6 months' time, something shifts and you kind of wasted that money. So we see that a lot. I see a lot of website rebuilds and redesigns after year 1, even though a lot of money's been committed. So think about that kind of phased approach where maybe you start from a kind of small point of view, a small website, maybe a handful of pages, and then think to build over time. Now, websites are really important. You know, you need to get them, you know, structured properly. You know, high quality content is really good for search engine optimization, so you need to be thinking about that. It will be your main destination for patients finding you. So it's an important thing, and I think, as Jane said, you know, you need to really speak to somebody who understands the private medical sector. That would be a general kind of designer just won't get it.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. And then we've got another few questions, which is great. Please do, if you've got anything you want to ask, please do put it on the Q&A section. So the next one is, how do I choose an accountant? And, you know, a lot of what I've said about websites, I think I would say again, really, I would definitely choose an accountant who understands this sector. Because you need someone who understands how private practice works from a tax point of view. And I think a lot of doctors, again, they don't always reclaim all of the expenses that they could be reclaiming. And so a good accountant can advise you on that. I would also, my other tip is to find an accountant sooner rather than later. Don't leave it until sort of the end of the year and think, okay, I need to do my first year account. Because engaging with an accountant on day 1 can help you, first of all, set up your company in the most tax efficient way for you, and just make sure that you get off to a really good start. So yeah, I would choose someone sooner rather than later, so you can benefit from their advice from day 1. Again, Simon, anything you want to add on?
Nothing to add there, Jane. I think you answered it perfectly. So.
Okay, and then the next question is, a bit embarrassed to go and see GPs. Any tips? Now, I guess what you're meaning is, you know, to go and see GPs with a view to them referring patients to you. I'm guessing that's where you're coming from. And yeah, we hear that a lot. You know, I think one of the things, and I'm not generalizing hugely, but doctors don't want to be personally marketing themselves. It's not something you feel particularly comfortable with. And I guess that's what you're doing when you go and see GPs. I mean, I think we've got, GPs are like anyone in the private healthcare sector. They are interested in anything that can make their job easier. So if you can find an angle to talk to GPs where you can offer a service that makes it easier for them to have their patients seen, then they will be interested in that. So that would be one tip I'd give, is trying to see it through their view. What are their pain points and how can you help solve them for them? But I would definitely, I would definitely, talk to GPs. I think your referral network is really, really important. And some of the clients where we help them with their marketing, the marketing is all about their referral network. It's not about us going out to find patients directly for them. It's about working with other specialists and GPs who will refer into them. So it's a really important thing to do. And I get, this is an area I know you'll have experience of, Simon, maximizing those referral networks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the point you made there is, putting yourself in the GP shoes and thinking about what their needs are, what's the gain creators and the pain relievers, how can you help them? And I think taking your time to have a personalized approach is really important. If you're going to blanket them on LinkedIn with unpersonalized kind of emails, then that's not going to work. But actually taking the time out to draft a proper letter, send an email, demonstrate that you've taken the time to think about what they need and their practice. I think that personalized approach, which I know you'd advocate as well, Jane, is definitely the kind of way forward. And also just I think a soft approach on LinkedIn often works well, that I'm looking to connect. This is what I'm doing. This is how I'm trying to help GPs. Often a non-sales led approach works very well. People will be very happy to kind of accept your connection. So I think,
and that kind of yeah. Sorry, Simon.
No, I was going to say, I think that I totally agree with the comments you made, and that approach is. I think a lot of doctors feel, as you said, that they don't want to be selling themselves, but it is an important part of private practice to build that professional kind of network. But you can do it the right way or the wrong way.
Yeah, and you can do it in a way that you feel comfortable with as well. Because I don't think it has. For me, I don't think it's. I wouldn't go about it in a way that was selling. It's more about extending your network of colleagues, and and that's a much nicer way to do it.
Yeah, building your professional network.
Yeah. And that question leads quite nicely into the next question, actually, which is the IDF a good networking organisation? For anyone who doesn't know, the IDF is the Independent Doctors Federation. It's a very, I don't know how many members they have now, but it's a very well attended group. And yeah, I would definitely recommend the IDF. We've done a lot of work with them over the years. They run a lot of CPD accredited events throughout the year. They also run the annual appraisal service. So if you need an annual appraisal, you can do it through the IDF. They have a meeting every year, which is sort of like a long weekend. I think this year they're off to Madrid for 3 days. And again, it's CPD accredited, and you get a huge number of doctors attend. So I would definitely consider the IDF. There are others. There's the London Consultants Association, which are very good. Those are the two that I think I would recommend most highly. But yeah, definitely have a look at the Independent Doctors Federation website, and I think you can go along to a few of the events just to see what you think and see whether you fit in, whether you enjoy it. But yeah, it's definitely worth looking at.
Got nothing to add there, Jane, I think, on that one.
Yeah. Okay. Any more? I think I've gone through them all. Oh no, there's more. Here we go. This is good. Is the cost of setting up private practice the same in London as it is in the Northwest or in the Midlands? Or does that vary depending on the area and associated costs? Okay, so I would say that one of the most significant, if you're setting up a clinic and you're going to be taking a premises of your own, so if you're going to be renting rooms, or buying rooms, I would say that's probably the biggest differential that you're going to have, is the cost of the accommodation. Obviously, rooms in Harley Street, I'm guessing, would be, well, they would be more expensive than rooms in other areas of the UK. So I'd say that's the biggest cost difference. Employment costs, they do definitely vary. I think you do have to pay more for your team in central London, and certainly that's more of an issue since COVID, because a lot of people are looking to work from home and they're much more reluctant to come into central London. So I think there's probably a difference in terms of employment costs. The other significant costs you're likely to have, insurance. In terms of indemnity, I don't think that would vary. So I think the main differences would be in terms of accommodation and employment costs. Again, Simon, anything else you can think
I'm
of?
nodding in agreement, Jane. I think the other costs that we'd be looking at I can't see there being much of a difference. For instance, sort of marketing or anything like that. That can normally be done remotely. I'd say it's the occupational costs of sort of rent and then staffing, because if you want somebody to work in central London, you're going to need to pay more than if you are working in the northwest or the northeast or the Midlands. So it demands a higher, teams demand a higher salary.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, good. And then we've got another one here. I struggle with virtual stuff. Do you do face-to-face in-person meetings? And if yes, where? So again, does this mean in terms of virtual meetings like this one, where you'd rather do this in a face-to-face setting? Then certainly that is something we can do. I'm trying to think if you mean that in terms of the private health sector. What's your take on that, Simon? Do you want me to read it again?
Yeah, I think if it's, I think we obviously do a lot of calls online, but yes, we're very happy. I think depending on where people are in the country, to meet. I think Jane, you're based similar location to me, aren't you, in sort of southwest London?
Yeah.
But we can travel, of course. So I think face-to-face meetings are important. Typically, we would definitely, when we work with our clients, we do meet them, from time to time. So it's important. Well, now we can meet face-to-face, then why not?
Yeah, I have to say, I really miss meeting face to face. I often say to people now, I'll come in and meet you, and they say, oh, no, Teams meeting or Zoom meeting is fine. I think it's, I welcome the opportunity to get together in real life. And actually, as a company, we do run, not often, but about twice a year, we run events for clients. So, and it's usually quite informal. It's just drinks and networking, and we'll have a couple of presentations. That we've always done that in London. We haven't done them outside of London, but hopefully that's something we can introduce as over time. But people really value the opportunity to get together in a room, I think.
Yeah.
And then here we go. Are there arrangements by which we can do a percentage deal with PA support whilst we grow, i.e. grow with you? Yeah, absolutely. So this is more, we'll come on to the ways in which you can resource your practice in webinar 2. So, and Simon's touched on it tonight. When you think about the team you need, a medical secretary is something that I would say, anyone who's going into private practice needs. You need somebody who's going to be looking after your patients from an admin perspective. In terms of our virtual PA service, we offer 2 different pricing mechanisms. One is a percentage based. So we charge a percentage of the income each month. The other way we charge is pricing packages based on the hours. So, and again, that kind of works in the same way, grows with you. So when you first launch, you might only need 10 hours of support a month. And so that's what we provide you with. And then as your practice grows, you need more and more support, and we just change you to a different package and we increase the amount of support we provide. So whichever way you want to go, we definitely work like that. Interestingly, our billing service, we always offer that on a percentage basis. And we only charge for the money we bring in. So if someone doesn't pay, then we don't get paid either. So that's a real kind of like really working together, because our success is determined by your success. So that's how we like to work. Again, anything that's probably more my area than yours, Simon.
Definitely your area, that one, Jane.
Yeah. And then finally, this is a nice one. Really great meeting. Love your enthusiasm and personalized approach. Oh, thank you.
Good. How are we doing for time, Jane? Are we?
I think we're getting to the point where we ought to wrap up, and I don't have any more questions coming in unless anyone wants to quickly put something on there. Should we head on to the next slide, Simon?
Here we go.
You've done it. Brilliant.
Any questions, Jane? I think if they just the info@designatedmedical.com, we'll be happy to answer any questions after today's webinar. So.
Yeah, I mean, these are the three things I just wanted to leave you with, really, is that myself and Simon would be very happy to meet with any of you individually if you would find that useful. Often in an event like this, there are things that you want to ask that are specific to your situation. And so if it would be helpful for us to get together with you and talk that through in more detail, we'd be really happy to do that. So just drop us a note. We also wanted to invite you to our WhatsApp group. We're setting this up purely for people who attend the webinars. And we thought it would be a really good way of providing ongoing support, where you can all support one another and we can also, answer questions. So, so that's something that might interest you. And then finally, of course, our next webinar is on the 3rd to the 24th of April. And we're going to be talking more about marketing, the patient journey, branding, and starting to talk about the sort of more operational side, including invoicing and delivering, a really good patient experience. So we sort of build on what we've talked about tonight and take it to another level of detail. And I'll send everybody a follow-up email in the next couple of days and just reiterating all of these points. And of course, you'll have my email, so you can then, any questions, just fire away.
Yeah, I think in that email we'll include a link to the WhatsApp group. So if you want to, you can join there. So
exactly. Sorry, this is just more detail about webinar 2 and the date for you there. So I think that's everything. I just want to thank you again for attending. And we'd love to see you next time. So I hope you can all make it next time. And as I said, if Simon and I can help in any way, please do get in touch and we'd be very happy to help. Okay, have a lovely evening, everyone.
Thanks for attending, and we'll see you next time.